Ready to dive into some love stuff?
Always.
Well, today we're deep diving the Love That Lasts podcast,
Okay.
hosted by Mark and Sophia.
I'm familiar with their work.
Yeah, their first episode is all about the foundation of what they call eternal love.
Right.
And we're going to unpack that.
Love that.
Go beyond just like the surface level relationship advice.
Yeah. It's one thing to talk about all those big ideas.
Totally.
Love,
Yeah.
trust, respect. But then how do those actually play out in a real relationship?
For sure.
In the messy reality.
Exactly. And I think we've all listened to those podcasts or read those articles and thought,
Yes.
okay, that sounds great, but how do I actually put that into practice? Like,
Right.
how do I do that?
Yeah.
So Mark and Sophia, they start unsurprisingly with trust.
Okay.
But not just the idea of trust.
No.
They really dig into why it breaks down and
Yeah.
then how to rebuild it even stronger.
And it's so interesting how they highlight that as like the bedrock. Like the foundation is trust. And it reminded me of Dr. John Gottman's research
Okay.
on trust bids.
Okay.
He talks about these small everyday moments where partners either choose to turn towards each other,
Okay.
showing that they care, they're listening, or they turn away.
Interesting.
And it's those little, like, seemingly insignificant interactions,
Right.
those trust bids that really add up over time to build a strong foundation or to chip away at it.
It's like those little moments of connection or disconnection that we might not even realize we're having.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Mark and Sophia actually get really real about this.
Okay.
Sophia admits to messing up early on in their relationship,
Oh, wow.
breaking Mark's trust.
Really?
And it's so refreshing to hear that honesty.
Absolutely. It makes them so much more relatable, which I think is so important for these types of conversations.
Yeah.
So they talk about rebuilding trust, and a big part of that for them is vulnerability. But they acknowledge that vulnerability can be tricky in a relationship.
It's not about just dumping all your insecurities and anxieties onto your partner.
Right.
It's more nuanced than that.
So it's not just like word vomiting all of your deepest fears at your partner.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
It's not
That word dog.
what we're going for.
Yeah.
And they really emphasize that it's about being authentic.
Okay.
Choosing to share those more vulnerable parts of yourself, but doing it in a way that feels safe
Right.
and
Well,
trusting.
interesting. Yeah.
Which I guess circles back to needing that foundation of trust in
Absolutely
the
fair.
first place
Yeah.
to even feel comfortable being vulnerable.
It's so true. And that's where I think understanding those different attachment styles can be really insightful.
Yeah.
Because if you're with a partner who is more anxiously attached,
Yeah.
they might need more reassurance,
Oh.
more explicit expressions of care and love to feel secure enough to then be vulnerable.
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all approach.
No.
It's about really understanding your partner's needs
Exactly.
and how they experience things like connection and vulnerability.
And this is where that love languages concept can be so helpful,
Oh, yeah.
right? Because if you know that your partner's primary love language is words of affirmation, then expressing your vulnerability through words,
Okay.
through heartfelt conversations,
Yeah.
is going to be much more impactful than, let's say, buying them a gift.
Totally. It's about tailoring your approach to what resonates with your partner
Yes.
and what makes them feel seen and understood on a deeper level.
Absolutely.
And speaking of understanding,
Okay.
Mark and Sophia also talk about respect
Okay.
as being essential for a healthy relationship.
Yes.
But they go beyond the obvious don't yell at your partner
Right.
type of advice,
Yes.
Yeah.
They talk about it as honoring each other's individuality.
which I think is such an important concept.
Yes.
Because it's not just about being polite to the other person. It's about recognizing and respecting them as their own person. Back their own dreams and their own values, even flaws.
Yeah.
And accepting those differences and even celebrating.
Right, because those differences,
Yeah.
when approached with respect and understanding,
Yeah.
can actually become opportunities for growth,
Totally.
both individually and as a couple.
So how do we actually put that into practice? What does it look like to honor your partner's individuality day to day?
Well, for starters, it's about creating space for your partner to pursue their own passions and interests,
Yeah.
even if those aren't things you necessarily share.
So if my partner's really into like collecting vintage stamps,
Right.
and I'm less than thrilled by that,
Yeah.
honoring their individuality would mean still encouraging them to go to those stamp conventions or carve out time for their hobby,
Exactly.
even if it's not something I'm personally interested in.
It's about recognizing that your partner's happiness and fulfillment matter.
Right.
even if those things don't perfectly align with your own. And it's about creating a space where you can both pursue those things that make you feel alive as individuals without feeling limited or controlled by the relationship.
It's about supporting each other's growth rather than holding each other back.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this ties into another key point that Mark and Sophia emphasize.
Okay.
Communication.
Okay.
And they're not just talking about talking more. They're talking about communicating effectively.
Which we all know is often easier said than done.
Right.
They actually make a joke about how often they hear couples say,
Yeah.
"We just need to communicate better."
Right.
And their response is always like, "Well, sure, but what does that actually look like?"
It's so true because effective communication is about so much more than just the words we say.
Okay.
It's about active listening, which they touch on.
Yeah.
But I think we can even take that a step further.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What would be that next step?
Well, think about it this way. Active listening isn't just about hearing the words your partner is saying. It's about really trying to understand the emotions and needs
Yeah.
beneath those words.
It's about tuning into the unspoken.
Yes.
The feelings behind the words.
Exactly. And that takes practice.
Yeah.
It takes empathy. And it often requires us to set aside our own assumptions and biases
Okay.
to really try to see things from our partner's perspective.
So it's about approaching those conversations, especially the difficult ones,
Yes.
with curiosity rather than judgment,
100%.
seeking to understand rather than to be right.
Exactly. And that brings us back to those love languages
Okay.
you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Because understanding your partner's love language can actually make you a better listener.
That's so interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way before.
Well, if you know that your partner's primary love language is physical touch,
Okay.
for example, and they're feeling disconnected from you, they might start initiating more physical contact,
Okay.
hoping to feel closer. But if you're not attuned to that,
Yeah.
you might miss those cues,
Right.
those unspoken bids for connection.
It's like they're speaking a language you don't understand. So instead of getting the message that they're craving more closeness, you might just think, oh, they're feeling cuddly today.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But if you understand that physical touch is their way of expressing and receiving love,
Okay.
you're more likely to pick up on those cues
Yeah.
and respond in a way that actually strengthens your bond.
That's such a good example. It's like learning your partner's emotional dialect.
Yes.
And that level of understanding can be so powerful, especially when it comes to navigating disagreements or those inevitable rough patches
yeah.
that every couple faces.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, no relationship is sunshine and rainbows 24/7.
Right.
Disagreements are bound to happen.
Yeah, they are.
It's how we handle those disagreements, how we communicate during those challenging moments.
Right.
That really determines the strength and resilience of our relationship.
It's not about if we fight.
Yes,
It's how we fight
exactly.
and how we come back together afterwards.
And this is where Mark and Sophia's emphasis on honoring each other's individuality
Okay.
becomes so crucial.
Okay.
Because if you have that foundation of respect for your partner as a separate person
Right.
with their own valid needs and perspectives, it becomes a little easier to navigate those differences when they inevitably arise.
You're not viewing those disagreements as personal attacks.
Right.
You're seeing them as opportunities to understand each other
Exactly.
on a deeper level.
And that's where their point about supporting each other's personal growth also comes into play.
Yeah.
Because if you're both committed to your own individual evolution, then change and growth within the relationship become not something to fear, but something to embrace.
So it's not about trying to fit yourselves into some static mold of the perfect couple. It's about creating a dynamic and evolving partnership that can adapt and grow alongside you.
Precisely. And that's what I found to be the most thought-provoking part of the entire episode.
Okay.
Their closing remarks about eternal love.
Okay.
Because what does eternal even mean
Right.
in the context of a relationship, especially given how much we change and evolve
Totally.
as individuals over time?
It's such a big question, right?
Yeah.
Like, can we really promise forever when who we are, what we want, even who we love might shift and change?
Right.
over the course of a lifetime.
It really makes you think.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not sure there's a single right answer.
Yeah.
But I do think Mark and Sophia are onto something
Okay.
with this idea of building a relationship that can weather those changes,
Okay.
that can adapt and evolve alongside you.
So it's less about finding someone who perfectly matches who you are right now,
Right.
and more about finding someone who you can envision growing with, even if those paths diverge and converge over time.
It's exactly someone who challenges you, inspires you, supports you through all of life's twists and turns.
Yeah.
And someone who, just as importantly, allows you to do the same for them.
It's about creating a space of mutual growth and evolution where you're both free to become the best versions of yourselves.
Yes.
Both individually and as a couple, which honestly sounds a lot more fulfilling
I think so.
than trying to cling to some static idea of eternal love.
Absolutely, because the real love, lasting love, isn't about staying the same.
Right.
It's about embracing the journey with all its uncertainties and complexities, alongside someone who truly sees you, supports you, and chooses you every step of the way.
I love that, and I think that's a beautiful note to end on. We've covered so much ground today, from those foundational elements of trust, respect, and communication to those practical tips for keeping the spark alive.
Yeah.
But most importantly, we've really delved into those deeper questions about the nature of love,
Right.
growth, and what it truly means to build a relationship that lasts.
And remember, it's not about trying to achieve some picture-perfect ideal,
Right.
but rather about finding what works for you and your partner and continuing to learn and grow together every single day.
So true.
Yeah.
So as you navigate your own love story, remember to communicate openly, respect each other's individuality, and never stop exploring those deeper questions about what love and connection mean to you.
And don't be afraid to get a little messy, to be vulnerable, to make mistakes,
For sure.
and to learn from them together, because it's often in those imperfect moments that we discover the true strength and beauty of a love that lasts.
Beautifully said. Until next time, happy diving.